Welcome to the Legacy Table Podcast, where we talk everything from faith to wellness. This is your space for real conversations, honest healing, and practical resources that support and inspire families to heal out loud and live legacy, not just leave it. All right, you all, we are back with another episode, and this week I am joined by none other than Shenika Parker. She's a mother, she's a grandmother, she is a creative, a fashionista, all of the things. But at the end of the day, she is a woman and she has an amazing story. And so today we're going to kind of just dive into a small bit of her story. Whatever she wants to share with us is what we're going to talk about now. She says she's a little nervous, but I just know she's gonna be good. I know she's gonna be good. Anybody that gets on here and talks to me is in good hands. They are going to be absolutely amazing. And so we're gonna get into this conversation. And so I'm just gonna hop right in and start talking and asking these questions. And she's just gonna answer, just very how she decides to answer. So Shanika, come on, talk to us. Talk to us. How you feeling? First of all, how you feeling?
Hello, Parent Network. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good
Okay,
today,
so no
feeling
complaints. All
fine.
right,
I
so we're
won't
just going to get
complain.
into today's conversation. Now, as you all know, we have been really kind of diving into some nuanced conversations, especially concerning like ego driven parenting and how us as parents possibly have parented from our ego. And then we've also received ego driven parenting from our
Mm.
own parents. And so it makes the adult parent relationship kind of complex. But before we get into the nitty gritty of that conversation, I was, before the episode, I always just kind of talking to the Lord about, like, what do you want the guests to share that's uniquely fitted to them? And I heard the word resilience. And so I said, okay, Lord, we're going to dive into that lane. And so for those that may be tuning into this podcast, this is a parent podcast, but we dive into faith and family. And so it is here to encourage you, to inspire you, to give you hope and tips. That is what this podcast platform is about. So it's not just my voice, but it is the voice of parents, of individuals that have access to children, their perspectives, and things of that nature. And so, Shanika, when you hear the word resilience, what do you think of pertaining to your life and just the word in general?
Mm. Um, oh, she put me on the spot, y'all. So resilience, I hear um what I see immediately is the phoenix, right? The animal or the mammal. Not quite sure which one it is, but the phoenix where you
Mm-hmm.
rise above, right? You push through some things, um, you learn from some things, you gather some nuggets for the next leg of a journey, is what I hear when I think about resilience. Um, I also feel like resilience is embedded
Mm.
in grace because howbeit that you have to have grace to overcome so many other circumstances. So you kind of, while it is a different word, it's interchangeable to identify with that. Because I don't think that we would be able to overcome many of the things we overcome, and be resilient, to be resounding, to be conquering in a
That's
situation without grace.
good. Listen, y'all. This is why I love conversations, you all, because you feed off one another. You said something so good that it's interchangeable with grace, because you need grace to be resilient. Now I'm gonna put this shameless plug, not so shameless plug right here, y'all. The book that I wrote, Grace to Pivot, is about my life.
Mm,
And as she just beautifully put, being resilient to be able to overcome every obstacle, every hurdle that has
mm,
challenged me or that I even perceived to be a challenge. Give me your take
mm,
on perception when it comes to overcoming like challenges and obstacles and all of that.
mm. Um, so the way I would be able to best articulate it, um, mm, wait a minute. I need you to repeat the question because that
So,
was very
what is your
meaty.
perspective on challenges and overcoming
Hmm.
challenges? Like, give us kind of a little bit of your story on how you've overcome some challenges and
Mm,
built resilience. And do you even think building resilience is a thing, or is it something that is innate within us?
mm. Um, I believe resilience, number one, is a mechanism of growth. I believe it takes you from one leg of a ladder to the other. It's definitely an ever moving situation, right? So to be resilient, it's not a so much of a goal. It is definitely a work towards. It's an ever present mechanism as it relates to growth. Um, to see someone being resilient or operating in a place of resilience, um, I believe that takes number one, um, grace, right? It takes his mercy in order to be able to operate in this place, because there's always different components uh, in that space, right? Number one, I have to choose to want to be in that space. So it's kind of like a lifestyle of saying, I can overcome this. I can get past this. I can, and sometimes those things are anchored down by what we get delivered from, right? Because you can be in a space of identifying rejection, allowing these things to hurt you, right? If you choose not to let go, you'll never be resilient and come into the full capacity and knowledge of saying, oh, I got delivered from rejection. Though it's going to come, it doesn't have to affect me at a
Yes.
1000%, right? So that's exactly where I see that space in
Okay.
conversation as it
So give
relates to that.
us a little bit of your story. You don't have to dive
Ooh.
into everything. I mean, give us what you desire to give us just around resilience a little bit. And then we're going to kind of pivot into that parenting part from our ego and how you have seen it play out
Mm,
from your parent to you and then from you to your children.
mm. So one of the things that I can look at, and coming from a place of resilience, um, there's more than one area, right? But since we're tapping in lightly tonight, I
Okay.
would have to say homelessness, right? So I went through homelessness. I was married, and we were in a place of just not, just truly not getting along,
Okay.
in a place of selfishness that we both operated in. And so I chose to stop assisting with paying the bills, right? Because it was a tit for tat moment. So we did all of these things. I ended up moving out with my girlfriend and I lived with her. I come home from a doctor's appointment one day and she had been evicted. Never told me she was behind, right? So me and my children's things that were on the lawn, people came and stole out of our stuff, right? Lost so much. Um, Things just gone. I'm just having an entire meltdown. I went from that to living with in a span of, I want to say 6 years. I think I lived, or me and my children lived with like nine different people, right? And we're talking like some homes, the grittiest of the gritty. And the very last house before we got this house, I remember we were staying in a young lady's basement. Half
My
of her
gosh.
basement was flooded with water. The other half was not. And so I took and made the very best of the situation, and I put up sheets that would cut us off from where the water was. I set everything up. Mind you, I was getting my associate's degree in psychology at the time. So my computer was a traveling computer. It was not a laptop. It was a traveling full on, computer. um and we're doing all of that, and I'm by a back door where the basement was, so I'm listening to people come and go every night, trying to monitor my children, making sure they were not being influenced by things. And I remember this one particular night, I was in worship and I cried my eyes out on the ground, on the basement floor, on the blow up bed. And I said to God, if I ever get the opportunity again, I'll never be selfish again, sir. When I don't want to clean, I'll clean my house. When I don't want to pay a bill, I'm going to pay a bill. Right? These are the things that I spoke back to him. And I saw a home, or someone sent me a house that was for rent. Called my He's my ex-husband now, but was my husband at the time, told him. The way that God escalated and pushed those things through, right, was it was just incomprehensible. That the man said, fill out this application, take a picture of it, and send it to me. Right. But we'll go back to the place of resilience, was because I can get off task quickly. I'm sorry.
Listen, it's okay.
Right. But it was
Share the
the,
testimony because again,
listen,
the podcast is not
uh,
cookie cutter. You know, it's not as we talked about before. It's not like, okay,
mm,
these are the questions. Stick to the script and let's go from there. It's very raw, authentic in the
right.
moment and whatever comes up, because it is again to inspire someone that is listening that what you feel like you might not have resilience in or overcome in, you're closer than you think. And I believe that is why that word
Mm,
resilience came up when I was just asking Lord, okay, Lord, how do you want to open up this podcast with her? And I heard the word resilience because
mm,
there's so many
wow.
levels to it. And if we become so fixated on
Mm,
I was down here on the ground and now I'm up here in the valley and and we skip
come on.
all the in between. How are we really reaching the everyday person that's like, I feel like I am below the ground? So you good. Go on, share your testimony.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that in between time from leaving there and finding this house was a space of living with different personalities. It was, until I cook in my kitchen, you don't come cook. You'll wait until I cook. So then you got my children who were on a routine of dinners at 5:30 at night. So now they're not eating until 10:30, right? And these attitudes and all of these things, or if you choose to go get your kids food out, McDonald's, right? I was told you got to go sit outside in your vehicle and eat with your kids because y'all didn't bring for the rest of the house, right? So just trudging and moving through these parts, right? And um because my kids, I have four. Camry was in college, so it was just the younger three. And we slept in the same person's house who has said to me, you have to eat outside with your kids if you're not going to buy food for everybody. And my kids were becoming so frustrated just being in the situation because they've always had their space, right? So it was a king size bed. So I turned the mattress so that it made sort of like a bunk bed on the edge. So every 2 days, everybody had their chance to sleep by themselves in, you know what I mean, on that other space, and not being the bed with everyone else, but we were confined to one bedroom, right? Because it was bad enough we didn't feel welcomed. But that's what we did. And God allowed me to pull from that strength of those moments, even the moments prior to where I'm at now, to say, look what you've gotten past before. Don't you know that very same strength
Ooh,
is available to you? You overcame it, right? So, what are you going to do? Are you going to reflect and remember on those times? Or are you just going to think this is just a new, some type of new strength I'm supposed to pull out the air for you? So, yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
sure I said a mouthful.
but it was so
Golly.
good because as you were talking, I'm just thinking about as parents, how innovative we are at times when we are at what we deem to be our lowest points, where it's like you said you flipped
Absolutely.
the mattress so that everyone had an opportunity to sleep by themselves just to provide that sense of sameness, of, normalcy, of routine
Yeah.
that once was. That takes a special type of parent. I mean, it's like I sometimes believe we don't give ourselves enough credit. We don't give ourselves enough grace. Although we do find ourselves in
Yeah.
situations, and albeit sometimes we put ourselves in the
Hmm.
situations that we find ourselves in, there
Absolutely.
is still, as you said, the grace of God, the favor of God to be able to say, hey, try this, do this. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
as you've kind of matriculated
Yeah.
through, that growth spurt, that period of your life, and now you all found the home that you're in, what was that transition back into
Hmm.
that normalcy, if I would say, or did the routine change? What conversations came up from, all right, we're not homeless no more. Now we're coming back.
So where that took me with my kids were they were exposed to things they never knew. That was the hardest part. Because now I have to deal with this new open doors, all of these new open doors, all of these different conversations, these different attitudes, um, these pieces that you picked up from other people, and which we'll get into that when we hit the ego parenting, okay? Because I listen, okay, I ain't gonna jump ahead of myself, right? But it's all of these. It was all of these different things, all of these challenges were so new, um, where you come from a place of being sheltered, and not knowing these things. So it was almost like we hit Vegas. It was like all of these doors have opened. And, when God created this opportunity, and we got here, and even on days that my children wanted to be relaxed from being from house to house, and my thoughts were, no, there was a promise that was made. Until this day I still do that. When I don't feel like cleaning, I clean. When I don't feel like doing, I do, because he held up his end, right, of a deal, and he brought me out of a, good lord, the craziest space. For so many years I lived in this cycle, this loophole, and he brought me out, and I've done my very, very best to uphold to that, right? So then it became having those hard conversations as a parent, because now they're full-fledged out there. They're full-fledged. They've seen, they've heard, um things attached to them. And I think that was the biggest part, even though the transition was happy, but it was the things that came for them, right? Which was because I had my own
Uh
God on how I was going to raise
oh. Uh
my
oh.
Christian children, right? And it was like, no ma'am, no ma'am, right? This is now,
When you
here is really
say
your
that
fight,
there were things that
you
they were
know.
exposed to, like what were some things that they were exposed to that they
Mm.
previously weren't?
um Drugs, um homosexuality, um God, what else? Porn, disrespect, verbally, to. different families, and that one family that we lived in the basement, you know, one of her kids was just like just over the top disrespectful. They were exposed to um like a, I don't want to say a crab in the bucket mentality,
Got you.
but it was
Got
a
you. I
dog
understand.
eat
Yeah.
dog world, right?
Yeah.
That I never raised them like that. So they were exposed to that I'm gonna get you before you
Okay.
get me type of mentality, and that made it for a harsh family environment, because then everyone was,
Yeah. You out. Everybody out
almost
for
like you were
themselves.
competing when you've never compete. Yeah, you've never had to compete all of these
Mm.
years. Now, now, it's that you treat your sibling or your family member like they were just the
Mm.
average Joe on the streets. Yeah.
Oh
So,
yeah, I asked that specifically because I know that that translates to the transition back into you all's own environment and how you had to pivot in your
hmm
parenting. Can you kind of share with us what that was like?
oh goodness, I was coming off like Rambo. I was like full fledged. I wasn't having it. I was angry about it. I was angry with my ex-husband for moving us to the first home that we had moved into, because it's so many compartments to this story, because I left him, but then I was sleeping in a parking lot, in a Kohl's parking lot with my kids in a truck, right? Till one night I called him, and then where he was living brought me there, so it's just so much to unpack there. But the pivot was, it was rough. There's gangs, you know, um, there's, I don't want to do Bible study anymore. I don't want to go, Sunday mornings. I don't feel like it. You know what I mean? So just having those conversations of, remember where we came from, right? This is just not what we're doing, right? So then it was implementing stronger boundaries, and rules, and like, this is just not what we're going for. And even when I got divorced, it still remains the same, And if you can adhere to it, then by all means, because I can't fight someone in my home when I'm the one that's taking care of everything for you, right? And that's kind of where
At the
I
time, how
trapped
old were the
myself.
kids when you guys transitioned back to your own space?
Let's see. Cam was in her 20s. So then you have Monte may have been like 17. So we're looking at like 17, um,
Okay.
14, 15, maybe
Okay.
13, those ages.
Okay.
Yeah, when we did.
Oh, it is. I know, like transition back into what you thought was changes when you are in a transition period. Like, and I know I keep saying transition, and I'm trying to make sure that I differentiate between what I mean, because you guys were stable, then you say you
Mm-hmm.
left, then you guys had, ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs, like the little heartbeat sign, and then you go back to your stable, but now that stable is not what was, and so you have to re-implement a whole new system. What would you share with a parent that
Absolutely.
is currently like experiencing that, where they have to implement a whole new system? Because the way I see it is, now you're parenting in a different stage. So now that you're parenting in a different stage,
Mm-hmm.
what does it take from you as the parent to show up? And what advice would you give someone?
I think it takes conversation. I think that's one thing that, and conversating at a different capacity, right? Because now they've experienced so many things. So now it's time to conversate about those things they've experienced from the upheaval, not
That's
just what
key right there. Opening
what
up
we
that dialogue
encountered.
both ways.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So to be able, and for a moment I was so rah rah, we're going to get back into routine, when just because my snapback went one way, they were introduced to an entirely different world that they had no inkling existed, right? So my advice would be conversate, right? Give them the grace and the space to articulate, what they feel, what the transition did to them, where it has placed them now, what their expectations of you are as a parent, because I do believe they should have that safe space, to be able to articulate what is it that you're looking for from me, right? And here I am now just learning all of these things. And
Baby.
my kids are grown now, right? But I'm learning these things, because before, I was going to interject with how wait a minute now, type thing. And it's just like, but no, because it doesn't just bother you, it trickled, it caught them, it did some things to them, it could have traumatized them, right? Just because I was at a performance peak of protecting does not mean that I safeguarded those
Girl, you better
emotions
stop now.
and those feelings that these children had, that they had. And I'm today, 20 years old, saying, "Oh my gosh, it bothered them
And
too."
see y'all, this
So,
is this
yeah.
is that smooth transition until our next topic of ego driven parenting, because as she said, she was at the peak. I love that, at the performance peak of protecting them physically. But as parents, sometimes we don't
Mm,
think, when we are in survival mode, that we still have to protect them emotionally and
mm,
mentally, and still provide, if you are
mm,
a believer, a spiritual regimen that they're able to digest and still feel that sense of normalcy. And so with that said,
absolutely.
y'all gonna have to come back for part 2 of ego driven parenting with Shenika, because it's getting ready to get gooder. It's getting ready to get gooder. So buckle up your seatbelts, y'all, because part 2 is coming.